Welcome to Fulbright Pulse. In this episode, Dr. Philipp Häusser is our guest. With Fulbright, Philipp earned a master's degree in physics from the University of California, Santa Cruz in 2014, before then obtaining a PhD in computer science and machine learning from the Technical University of Munich. Philipp is a science communicator, hosting TV shows on major German TV channels including SWR, BR, ZDF, WDR and ARD, producing YouTube videos for the YouTube channel Breaking Lab that now has more than 450,000 subscribers, and publishing books. We talk about what drives his work.
Yeah, to spread knowledge. That has been my key motivation to do this.
About his latest book, AI Explained for Everyone.
So I was picturing my mom when I was writing most of the book, and my mom is by no means stupid, right? My mom is a doctor and she is a smart person, but she's not a very technical person, right? So when she can manage her smartphone, she's already happy. And I believe that there are many people like this who per se are smart and have the mental capacity, but they don't have the information that they need so they can talk about AI, which is necessary because AI is transformative.
The impact of artificial intelligence.
But it's an example for it. You give the AI a way to interact with your life and to take away something from you or to give something to you. That is always dangerous. So we need to be very mindful of exactly those scenarios.
And more generally, the role of science in society.
I think, yes, we need to be way better. We as scientists need to be way better explaining to the general public what we do and to make sure that people do trust us again. I think at the end of the day, it's a lot about trust.
We also talk about Philipp's role as the Chief Technology Officer at Ablacon, a HealthTech startup that has closed a $30 million funding round in the past year.
The vision of the company is to revolutionize the way how patients with heart arrhythmias are treated. And my role is to make the software happen for that.
And we find out about the decisions that brought him there.
Something here deep in my heart told me, hey, this is cool, but are you really convinced, Philip? And at that time, I met Peter.
I'm certain you'll enjoy this episode with Dr. Philipp Häusser, interviewed by Mohammed Khan. Philipp, it's great to have you today.
Thanks for having me.
So, just in the beginning of November, you released your new book, Natürlich alles künstlich, was künstliche Intelligenz kann und was noch nicht, KI erklärt für alle. Everybody who didn't understand that so far, maybe let me translate that. Naturally, everything artificial, what AI can do and what it can't yet. AI explained for everyone. It's available on Amazon, also available on Audible as an audiobook narrated by you. So what was your motivation to write this book?
The motivation was to fill the gap between programming tutorials for AI and high-level philosophical books that only touch the highest level. We as a society need to be prepared, and AI might take over and everything. And I thought that for our society to be able to discuss these topics in a reasonable way, people need a bit more information than their AI is there, right? And on the other hand, the expectation is not that everyone becomes a programmer and will write their own code to program their own AI. That's, of course, also nuts. So I thought it would be great to have a book that tells people like, let's say my mom. So I was picturing my mom when I was writing most of the book. And my mom is by no means stupid, right? My mom is a doctor and she is a smart person, but she's not a very technical person, right? So when she can manage her smartphone, she's already happy. And I believe that there are many people like this who per se are smart and have the mental capacity, but they don't have the information that they need so they can talk about AI, which is necessary because AI is transformative. It is already present everywhere in our daily life, and it will become even more present in the future, and it will change so many things. It is changing so many things today already. So we need to talk about it, but we need to do this in an informed way. So the idea behind the book is, hey, let's, like a documentary, let's write a book that takes people on a journey, starting from the first principles of how does machine learning work, how does learning in the human brain work, just in very coarse in a very low level, right? So I'm not going into all the latest breaking neuroscientific insights, but super roughly what happens when light falls in your eye onto the retina, it gets transformed into neural activities, projected back into the brain, and so on and so forth. And how do different stimuli cause your brain to learn something, and what can we learn from this so that we can train machines maybe to solve some problems, right? Ideally, people find it somewhat entertaining, and they can take away a few key insights, like, hey, just because something is AI doesn't mean it's smart. It might be able to solve one thing really well, but that doesn't mean it will take over the world tomorrow.
Speaking of taking over the world tomorrow, where do you think AI will be most beneficial to society, and where will it be most harmful?
Most beneficial, I think most beneficial whenever we really own the AI that we employ. So for example, this can be a small business owner who sees, oh, I'm doing this job in my Excel spreadsheet every day. This is a very repetitive task and I'm not really good at it. I make mistakes. Let's automate this in some smart way. This is already partially AI, right? I mean, we first should answer the question, what is AI after all? And probably my definition would be completely frustrating and disappointing, because it's everything that is code that solves a problem, more or less, is something that we could call AI. What I like to focus more on is machine learning, right? So we train the computer to solve some problems. But AI can be extremely helpful whenever we make AI work for us in a controlled way, which implies that we understand what it is, what it can do, what it cannot do. When you leave the realm of data in which the AI was trained, and you train your AI on recognition of cats, and suddenly you try to apply it on dogs, naturally it won't work, because AI is not smart. Right? So that is an example where I think when we make this self-contained and we really own this and we apply it in scenarios where we have it under control, then it can do a lot of good things for us. And since I work in the medical device industry now, of course, I believe that AI can help tremendously when it comes to treating patients better, when it comes to finding the most appropriate therapy for a specific patient, not just giving them the gold standard. Don't give them the solution that works for the majority of patients. Hey, this is an individual. This is a person that you need to spend time with as a doctor. But so many doctors don't have time to fully understand this patient with all their biomarkers and all their properties and whatnot. But if AI can help as a tool, again, in a controlled way, that this doctor has more time with the patient, and this doctor has a pop-up that tells him, hey, in the world, there are 3 other people like him or her, and those treatments help them, then that can be very, very helpful. On the other side, your question was, where can it do harm? Just invert everything I said, and that's the answer. But to flesh it out just a tiny little bit, whenever we give AI control over part of our lives, and we don't stay in control, then things get out of hand. And a great example for this is what happened on the stock market when people started to automate some of the trades. And whether you want to call it AI or not, there were some trading bots involved and some algorithms that made decisions whether or not they wanted to buy a certain stock for certain prices. And this then got out of hand, because there was this one trading bot, there's another trading bot, and maybe yet another trading bot. And then you got a feedback loop, and this completely escalated and caused a crash, or at least a partial crash in the stock market, which made many people suffer, right? So that was uncool. Whether or not this was the AI's fault or not, that's a different discussion, in my opinion. But it's an example for it. You give the AI a way to interact with your life and to take away something from you or to give something to you, that is always dangerous. So we need to be very mindful of exactly those scenarios.
Mm-hmm. All right, interesting. And so you've, in the beginning, you spoke about health. So if I got it correctly, you are also the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer of Ablacon, a health startup that has, I think, just in the beginning of the year, collected $30 million in financing, just in the beginning of this year, right? So what is the company's vision and what is your role there?
The vision of the company is to revolutionize the way how patients with heart arrhythmias are treated. And my role is to make the software happen for that. So on a broader scheme, we address a specific type of heart arrhythmia at this point, which is atrial fibrillation. It's a condition affecting roughly 60 million people worldwide. And what happens is that our natural pacemaker in the heart doesn't work anymore. So for those who are not really familiar with the way how our heart works, in a nutshell, we have a structure that's called the sinus node that acts as our natural pacemaker, the location that triggers action potential wavefronts, electrical signals that propagate across the heart, which macroscopically will cause this contraction that then causes the heart to pump blood through the body. So that's the standard so-called sinus rhythm because it's governed by the sinus node. The EKGs don't look like sinus waves. So maybe some people were confused. Why is it called sinus rhythm? This doesn't look like a sine wave. So long story short, that is the normal operation mode of the heart. In atrial fibrillation, what happens is that in the atria, the small little chambers at the top, there are structures that may cause or may trigger additional action potential outbreaks. And this can be because of cells that fire just randomly. This can be because of structural remodeling of the tissue, of the substrate. This can be because somewhere in another anatomical structure, there are locations from which action potential wavefronts emanate. And the consequence of this is then that the sinus node is not the only origin of action potential wavefronts anymore. And you can imagine that once you have those many wavefronts colliding, chaos can form. It's a little bit like when you are on a rowing boat and you have your pacer sitting in the back who says, row, row, row. I don't know exactly if this is how they work, but it always looks like this. And then you have someone who also randomly shouts in, row, row, but then you will get out of sync and you won't move your boat. And something like this can happen in the heart. Mm-hmm. Usually in the beginning, this is just what we call paroxysmal. So it happens, then it goes away again, then again it happens, and then for 3, 4, 5 months, maybe the patient doesn't feel anything. But if you don't do anything about it, if you don't manage your AF, your atrial fibrillation, then this can perpetuate and become persistent. And in that case, the atrial tissue will remodel in a way that's such that it's really very, very hard to treat this patient. All right, so what do we do now? People have known these conditions in the past, and people have developed diagnostic catheters, like a so-called basket catheter that can get inserted minimally invasively through the groin, through the inferior vena cava. That's a big blood vessel that goes in the right atrium. And there we can pop up this basket that has 64 electrodes touching the atrial wall from the inside. And those electrodes can then measure the electrical activities on the inside of the heart. And again, people before us have developed this. It's not our invention, but people have struggled interpreting those signals because, as you can imagine, you have 64 spike trains with chaos. Atrial fibrillation is difficult to treat because it's so chaotic. And people have looked at those and tried to algorithmically figure out where those action potential wavefronts are coming from, but they've had a very hard time. And what we introduced was a novel algorithm that is actually derived from computer vision. And we more or less track those signals like you would track a pixel in a video. And then we track them back and say, hey, this is the spot where all of this is coming from. And we can quantify that this is active in so many % of the time. And then the doctor can move to this spot with a so-called ablation catheter and burn this tissue locally in order to turn it into scar tissue, which cannot conduct electricity anymore. And then if you do everything right, you have cured your patient. So that's the dream case. That doesn't always work out perfectly because every patient is different. This is a very, very difficult disease, but we have made a contribution to further understanding this disease and to treat it more efficiently, as we have demonstrated in our clinical trial.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so you said you make the software happen for that. So how many software engineers do you have in your company?
We have right now about 22 software engineers.
Wow. Okay. So that's not a playground anymore. That's serious, right? So you're really trying to advance the problem here.
Yeah. Wow. NVIDIA stopped our startup grant because they said, you're too big, you're not a startup anymore. So you have to now pay for your GPUs.
Wow, that sounds like something that you want to read, even though GPUs are expensive. I know that. Okay, all right.
That's true.
How did you find your way to Ablacon?
That's a fun story because actually, when I was about to finish my PhD, I was almost 100% sold to joining a self-driving car startup in Cambridge, UK, who tried to solve self-driving cars with neural networks, with AI. And I found this extremely compelling and super exciting. And, I wanted to do something where I can really push the boundaries of what's technologically possible today. And self-driving cars are one of those domains where you can do this. And I went there many times and met the guys and the girls who worked at this startup. I mean, it was about to be founded at that time. It was just about to form, and something here deep in my heart told me, "Hey, this is cool, but are you really convinced, Philip?" And at that time, I met Peter, the person who came up with the idea to address something inside the heart with algorithms that were made for computer vision. And he's a professor for biophysics. He has led the research department at Uni Tübingen, and then at some point decided that he wants to do something else in his life, became a venture capitalist, invested in many companies, made many successes, a bunch of mistakes as well, as it's always the case, and helped other companies become big. And he has seen many things, but still at the age of, back then, I think 59 or so, he never lost this energy of and this enthusiasm to do something himself with his own hands. And even though he wasn't able to program and write software, he used whatever he could with some other tools to click together a prototype. And I found this extremely impressive. And when he asked me, he emailed me because I worked at this department at TU Munich on computer vision topics, and he was looking for somebody who's working this domain. And he asked me, "Hey, can you help me?" And usually, when you receive emails, "Hey, I've invented something really cool. Can you please implement this for free?" and you get 0 shares, then usually it's not very interesting scientifically, and also in general, it's not very interesting. And in his case, it was completely different because it was an exchange, a scientific exchange on something that I found interesting. He was able to explain to me what the problem is that he's trying to solve. So I asked, "Hey, send me over some data. I want to play with your data." So he did this. I programmed up something, and then let it run overnight and send it back. And he said, "Well, actually, this looks really cool. I spent the past half year doing this." And I mean, it's completely different when you know Python and you can just software engineer together some first proof of concepts. And so that's what I did. And he said, after a few weeks of interaction, he said, "Would you be interested in maybe joining?" And then that's when I realized, yes, this is what I want to do. I don't want to move to Cambridge, UK and be part of the crazy world of self-driving cars. I want to apply what I've learned so far on this topic to hopefully at some point help patients and doctors.
Wow, that sounds inspiring. Good chance. I listened to it. I understand that was a bit of chance involved, right? But sounds actually like a interesting and much more fulfilling thing to work on than the world of self-driving cars, which is going to happen anyways, right? Anyways, so you already spoke a bit about your PhD, but maybe let's get back even a bit further. Maybe let's get to your master's. So you had a Fulbright scholarship for studying, for earning your degree, your master's degree at University of California, Santa Cruz. Why did you apply for a Fulbright scholarship, and why did you want to go to UC Santa Cruz?
So I first learned about Fulbright when I was at high school because I wanted to do a year abroad. And I didn't get in, unfortunately, right? So I sat in this interview and someone else got it. And I thought, but those people that I met, they were really interesting, right? Really inspiring people. So I kept this in the back of my head that there is this Fulbright thing. And then like I said, I didn't get in. So I decided I'll postpone my US year abroad to some later time. I won't do it during high school. and maybe I'll figure out a way to do it during my studies. And in the undergrad in physics, it didn't really make sense to run away for a semester or a year, because then going back and getting everything credited for that will, at the end of the day, will mean that you will spend yet another extra year until you have all your credits together. And I spent some time before I started my studies doing something else to work. So I didn't want to lose more time than necessary. I mean, at the end of the day, 1 or 2 years is never a problem, I believe. But yeah, I felt like, okay, let's not waste time. Good. So I didn't do it during my undergrad, and then tried to figure out ways to do it in the master phase. And I realized that every construct where you try to fit it into an existing schedule from another university is a pain to make that work. Unless someone has worked out a program or some exchange program and everything is kind of prepared already and the university knows what's coming, if you have to do it yourself, depending on the university and depending on how much time you have, this can be a nightmare. So I thought, okay, why don't you try and get the whole degree abroad? And at that time, I remembered there's Fulbright, but also there's German National Academic Foundation, and there are some other institutions that might be able to help you and also to guide you, right? Because I've never done this before. And so maybe if there is an institution that gives out scholarships, they might know a few things about how to do this right. All right, so I applied, and it was very exciting. I found those interviews very exciting, but also frightening, to be honest. But at the end of the day, it worked out. And then the big question was, of course, which university? And everyone probably knows how the process works at Fulbright, that either you can request a placement, but then you have no idea where they put you. So it's like playing the lottery, or you try and do it yourself. And I wanted some degree of control, and I decided to take it in my own hands, which was, again, a very time-consuming task. And I applied to a ton of different universities, and I completely underestimated what it means to get your GRE tests done and all those pre-tests. And it's like a startup pitch just for yourself. You have to talk with professors, and you have to figure out the networks and find people who support you and so on. My grades were good, but not like 99.99 percentile. And so, long story short, I then had the choice to either go to LA or to Santa Cruz. And I thought, I actually like the idea of being able to bike to campus. In LA, that would have not been possible, at least not from what I've heard, or not that easily, without getting killed potentially. So I thought, let's keep it easy. And the project was really interesting that I found, that through which I got in touch with this professor who then supported my application, which is, I believe, what you more or less need to do unless you're like extremely, extremely good student. And so this is how I decided for Santa Cruz, because the location was nice and the research topic seemed reasonable. The professor was extremely helpful and nice and understanding in the first contact, and he really inspired me back then.
I see. So even though you did your master's in physics, then at UC Santa Cruz, you decided to pursue a computer science degree for your computer science PhD. How did that come about?
Yes, that happened as follows. I was in the middle of my master's degree at UCSC, and my task was to process a ton of data and to analyze biosignals that we recorded. Project was about the development of implants for the retina for people who have a specific kind of blindness, in which the rods and cones, the cells that first transform light that falls into our eye into electric signals that then at some point the brain can work with. And the idea was to try and mimic this behavior. And therefore, we needed to understand how exactly the chip should work. What does the eye tell the brain was the title of the paper. So to that end, we recorded a ton of data in rat eyes. And my job was to process part of it. So the research group had already implemented a processing pipeline that they had been using for decades, apparently, and it worked, but it didn't work perfectly. We had to throw away a lot of data because it was noisy or was just too difficult for that algorithm to deal with. And I was frustrated because I thought, this seems like a great inefficiency. And also, I'm not a huge fan of rats, but whenever you do such kind of experiments, you need to make sure that you do everything that you can to be as efficient as possible and to get everything out that you can. And those people, they put a ton of thought into this, right? It's not like they're all stupid and they didn't know what they were doing. They were already they were focusing on some other aspects which greatly advanced science in this part. But I, as a person who always tries to find new ideas and always tries to reinvent everything against the advice of my advisor, I went to the computer science department. I mean, it wasn't like he forbid me, but he said, you have other things, you have other problems, focus on this and that. We've always worked with this algorithm. Come on, focus. And I thought, in my free time, I'm allowed to not focus. So in my free time, I'll go over to the computer science department. And
are you supposed to have free time? I'm shocked. You're not supposed to have free time.
In Santa Cruz, yes.
Okay, I see.
Yes. Okay. On a Sunday between 3 and 5 p.m. That's
okay. All right, that's a lot.
The group was really laid back. I mean, we did work really hard, but work hard, play hard. That was not only their motto. And so I went to the computer science people. I told them my problem. I explained the project a bit, and they said, why don't you try and apply machine learning techniques on this problem? I said, machine what? I have no idea what you're talking about. I studied physics, right? So in physics, you do learn to program a bit, but not that much, right? It's more or less about, okay, how do we numerically solve this and that physical problem, which is, again, very abstract, but you don't get this software engineering knowledge that you need in order to engineer together your solutions just by using Google and Stack Overflow. And at the same time, I think machine learning, it plays a big role in physics, right? So the LHC people, they have no chance of parsing all their data without some degree of machine learning or anomaly detection, etc. And so I was shocked that I had never heard of this, but at the same time, extremely excited to learn about it. And I spent every 3 minutes, the few 3 minutes that I had reading more about it. I even convinced my program advisor that I need to take this one course about machine learning and big data analytics because I need this for my program. So she allowed it, and my professor supported it because they thought, okay, this guy's lost anyway, so I'll let him do this. And that's when I first learned a bit about how to write code for such kind of problems and implement k-means on Google Compute, on the Google Compute platform, and so on. And yeah, when I saw the end of my program approach, I thought, I'm not done yet. I need to learn more about this. What's the best way to learn about it? So this was 2014. So the big ImageNet breakthrough by Alex Kruszewski et al. Was 2012-ish, right? So that was fairly recent. And there were not a ton of tutorials on the web library like there's today. There was no TensorFlow.org where you can read and watch a ton of tutorials. There are no millions of YouTube channels that teach you how to program neural networks. And I thought, I still want to learn more about it. So the best thing that I could think of was to reach out to universities that teach this. So maybe somebody has the need for somebody like me who can help and learn. And that's how because I knew that I was supposed to go back to Munich or back to Germany, and I had kept my apartment in Munich. And I was looking for research groups in Munich, and I found two of them who both invited me to give a talk or to get in touch with them. And I thought, okay, I studied physics. I had one semester programming for physicists, right? So I'm entering the computer science department now. I have no idea exactly what they expect from me. So I tried to pull together every slide that I could that looks somewhat like computer science and explain to them what we did and what the problems were and how I tried to solve it and what my thoughts were and so on and so forth. And then one of them said, we have an open position for a PhD student. Why don't you apply? And I thought, okay, I mean, I can do that, but ask me 3 questions from the first semester of the computer science curriculum, and I will fail. And he said, what we're looking for is people who can program and who know math. And math I knew, and programming self-taught. Let's see how well that goes.
I see. I have multiple follow-up questions. First is, did you rent out your apartment in Munich through Airbnb or something? Or how did you manage to afford a second apartment in Munich? Okay, so I see you rented it out.
No, yes. So, I mean, usually those annual periods are easy to sublet, because that's often what other people look for. And it was exactly for the whole academic year. And through the university network, was extremely easy to find somebody who is now actually a good friend of mine. So that went out nicely.
I see. Okay, I think the group that you ended up with was actually the group by Professor Kremers, right? Who had also been a guest to this podcast already. So I think all the listeners that are like listening to, of course, regularly to this podcast will know that he had similar vita, also first doing physics and then computer science. So maybe that helped a bit. I could imagine.
I agree. That probably helped a bit.
All right. Did you have fun in Santa Cruz too? It sounded like a lot of work. So, or in the US during your stay, was it also a fun time, or was it mostly hard
Absolutely work? No, without the fun, I wouldn't have made it. And again, maybe I didn't explain this, but I was enrolled in the PhD program because they don't have a master's program for physics, which is often the case in American universities, that either you do your bachelor's and then you go off and work, or you do your PhD because you want to do science and academic work. And those who want to do master programs, at least that was what they told me, are usually if you have worked a bit and then you just want to get an additional degree so you can climb the career ladder. And however, UCSC in their curriculum had this clause that said, yeah, if you get so many credits and this and that coursework and you pass all PhD qualification exams and 10 other criteria, then you are eligible for the master's degree. And I read this, and I asked the study advisor, hey, so I saw this. Is there a time minimum on this, or could you theoretically do this in 1 year? And she laughed at me. Nobody's ever tried this, but be my guest. Try your best. And I thought, okay, challenge accepted, because I didn't want to leave without a degree, right? That would be crazy,
right? Yes.
And so that meant, yes, I had to work a lot during this year, but I did also prepare a lot. For example, those PhD qualification exams, it's like 5 exams on 5 days, 4 hours each, like about everything in what we learn in our undergrad and what PhD students at that university at least learn in their undergrad and in the first year-ish. And you have to pass them so that you can get enrolled into the PhD program. Otherwise, you're just a candidate or some other status. And so that was a ton of work, but I was able to prepare a bit. And then probably everyone who has done a year abroad, whether it's Fulbright or another program or during high school, they will understand immediately when I say, and we talked about this earlier, and you said that this was the best time of your life. And I always find it very difficult to say this was the best time of my life, because you never know what's coming. But it was the best time of my life, probably this year. And the second I landed, I was completely flashed with everything. New country, new people. I had been to the US before, but it was a complete different experience, and there was so much adrenaline and endorphins and all sorts of neurotransmitters flooded through my body that this year flew by with a ton of fun, yes, and a ton of work, but I would do it again immediately.
I see. So then you did your PhD in computer vision at TU Munich. Maybe in 2 sentences, what did you work about in your PhD? What did you work on in your PhD?
Okay, the first sentence is I did not work on what we registered the thesis for.
Okay.
It was something completely different. And the second sentence is I eventually ended up working on novel ways to train neural networks in a way that requires less labeled data. That was maybe a bit too technical for those who don't know what neural networks are.
But for those people who don't know what neural networks are, I know a good book that they could buy to find it out, right? Isn't it?
I thought you were referring to Daniel Kramer's podcast episode.
No, I was actually referring to your book, but you're being too modest here.
My book. Okay. I was thinking, okay, tell me. I want to learn more about
you want to read it. Maybe you've read it. Okay. All right.
Yeah, fun fact. My book was already advertised on Amazon before I finished it. So I thought, what happens if I just stop writing and I just order it and wait? And then go in the basement, don't answer the calls from the publisher, and just wait for the book to arrive. Schrödinger's book.
Schrödinger's book. Did you? How was your experience writing this book? Was it a fun time, or was it similar to your experience in the US? Fun and also hard work, or was it this easy? Like as a computer science, artificial intelligence, computer vision PhD student, successfully like already graduated with his PhD. Was it easy to write? Or what was the most difficult part about writing? And how long did you take? How's your writing mode? Anyways, do you write like one page a day, or how do you write?
Yeah, what made it easier probably was that during the time we all were in the lockdown in Germany, and I couldn't do many other things anyways. And so my mode was that on the weekends I go to the office because nobody else is there. It's a completely clean environment. And I try to write 5 pages per day, and that for so many months, right? So I made a spreadsheet, and I tried to break it down as much as I could. That's always like physicist approach. You have a big complex problem, break it down into easy little tasks, and writing 1 page can be difficult, but you can do it. Writing another page. Same thing, right? So page for page. And what I did was I made a big brainstorming, of course, in the beginning with a publisher, what aspects could be interesting. And then I made a ton of those Post-its and wrote down those different ideas. And then I distributed them, I reordered them. And I spent so much time trying to write the table of contents and to map it out like from beginning to end. And then one day I finally started writing, and I realized that I can completely scrap this. I will do something different anyway. But it was good to have thought through all these topics, because then I might just reorder them eventually. And there were some points where I thought it feels really like you are in your own documentary, and you are in the driver's seat. You can decide what comes next, right? So you know those movies or those DVDs. Good old times where they had alternative endings, and you can then choose whether you want this or that. And it felt like this, just on steroids, completely. Okay, this is your documentary, and I saw everything in my like imagination what the Netflix documentary would look like. Fingers crossed. I mean, there's not no such thing planned, or I mean, I reserve the rights for this.
Oh, as soon as they hear this podcast and hear about the idea,
I hope so.
You're gonna get a call.
I hope so.
I hope.
Right, but it really felt like, oh, this is naturally what must come next now, and now this is interesting. How does this tie back to the big topic that we're trying to discuss, and the big questions that hopefully the reader has as well? Because you sit in a bubble, and maybe people find it completely not interesting, this one chapter, but then they can skip it. So that was my working mode. And then, of course, things happened. You're demotivated at some point. You don't achieve anything. And then my grandpa passed away during that time, and that really threw me back. And you know, there was a month when I achieved 5 pages or so, and then at some point, with the deadline approaching, you just have to write more. There's no other way. And then you lock yourself in. You take days off, and you make it happen.
So then you have been in your PhD, and during that time, you also interned with Google and with Google Brain, right? So that is maybe one of the most sought after industry career paths that you could have, like being a PhD student at a great university, going to such a great company, probably having the brightest minds, some of the brightest minds in that area, and it seems you decided to go your very own way. So why did you decide to not go the classical way of maybe staying with them?
That's a great question. Yes, and I did very, very seriously consider working at Google because I had a great time there. Not everything is perfect, of course, but they do many things right, at least from an intern's perspective. And I thought at the time when I was in this position to decide, should I go with this startup or maybe another startup or with a startup at all, I thought, now I have all this energy and I have all this freedom to choose what I want to do next. And hopefully Google is still there in 3, 4, 5 years. This startup, maybe not. Maybe this opportunity will be gone. And that was basically the rationale, that those big companies will always be there, and hopefully they will still be interested in you. That's the other question. Maybe they don't want to hire you anymore. But chances are that if they're interested in you once, then they will be interested in you 3 years later if you haven't done just complete nonsense during that time.
I see. Interesting. And so turns out instead the way one choice you made was staying in scientific journalism. That book is latest proof of that, right? So together with mighty Nguyen Kim, I hope I pronounced her name correctly.
Nguyen Kim.
Nguyen Kim.
Like Nuremberg.
Nuremberg. I see. Okay, Nguyen Kim, Jakob Bouton, also Harald Lesch and Ranga Yogeshwar, maybe not the young generation anymore, but anyways, you belong to those scientific journalists. So first question, do you guys have a WhatsApp group together that you schedule a beer from time to time, having a Weizenbier maybe? We know that Harald Lesch likes that. So do you guys have a WhatsApp group together? First question. You don't need to answer if you don't want to.
No, there used to be this group Wissens-YouTuber on WhatsApp, but in the past few years, it kind of became very silent in that group. I just looked it up again. It still exists, but okay. I do have Jakob's phone number, of course, because we work together. I do have Mai's number because I met her back then when we all had very small YouTube channels.
However, not small anymore, right? So small, I just looked it up.
She's extremely busy these days with her family and her new TV programs and so on. So it's unfortunately very difficult to get any FaceTime.
I see. Second question would be, even though we have so many great scientific journalists in Germany, currently we see with all the vaccination, how do you say, skepticism in the country. It seems that people are somehow resistant to scientific information. So is that something that scientific journalism can solve, can contribute to, or is that a different kind of problem? So do you try to do entertainment for those people who are already interested? Or what would be your perspective on this problem? And maybe is there something that people like you can do about it?
That's a great question. And I've asked myself this question over and over the past 2 years because I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how people can watch the news, can read something on the web, whatever it is, and seriously say that I don't trust those scientists and I don't want to get vaccinated because I think there is a microchip in there. I cannot understand it. I really, if somebody's listening to this or watching this and they can explain to me, please tell me. But because
that would be actually a great innovation for Ablacon, I guess. If you were suddenly able to put microchips somewhere in but I guess that's not possible today, right?
We only put electrodes, but we retract them at the end, so it won't remain in the body. But no, I mean seriously, this is a really big problem, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Imagine what happens when there's more and more AI, which is something that's really difficult. Understanding how a vaccine works. That people can understand it. Maybe they don't understand all the intrinsics of how an mRNA vaccine works or the vector vaccine or so. But the general principle is it's like a muscle that you train. You train your immune system with this vaccine. This is something that people have a chance to understand, I believe. AI is also understandable. It's just way more complex and difficult. when there is the first time that a self-driving car goes crazy on German streets, or something else happens, some automated. It doesn't even have to be very, very artificially intelligent. It just can be artificial, and so some algorithm goes crazy, and people believe that this is something against me. Then they will go completely crazy, and we need to be better at explaining what we do. Absolutely. The thing is that this pandemic just came about so suddenly that, of course, there was no time to write a big, nice textbook. And then there's page 400. Coronavirus. What do you do? What does it mean? Right. So this came so suddenly, and people were so emotional about it. And I've been emotional about it. Just today, I learned that probably they're going to close the gym again next week. And I find this very sad because I like going to the gym. And I need to stay active.
To be honest, yes, of course. I mean, like I'm a bit I can be a bit honest here. I think it's I get a better feeling if the gym's closed, and that is a good excuse not to go there. But maybe for people who but all right, I see that for you, right?
The thing is, exactly. But now we can talk about the technical details, right? So we can talk about which hygiene measures really work. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes always sense to disinfect the machines that you've used afterwards, but does it make sense to wipe everything constantly and not touch anything anymore? No, because the smear infection plays a way inferior role as opposed to the infection through aerosols. So you need to think about how do you make sure that the aerosols in such a room are have a chance to go away, or you have enough ventilation, etc. But like I would like to talk about those details instead of yes or no and lockdown yes or no, because it's the only thing that we can. Sometimes it feels like this is the only thing that people understand. We tell them to stay at home because everyone can understand this, as opposed to let's have a debate on would you trade your freedom to leave your home for the freedom to do whatever you want to do, wherever you want to do, without anybody knowing it. So what I mean is, I've never witnessed a debate on what people call tracking apps, and this term raises 10 million red flags for 99% of us. But seriously, if we allow some technological solution that achieves the same goal, but we trade a different human right, then maybe some people would prefer that. I personally would much rather get tracked for a limited amount of time in an anonymized way, or in a way such that I know exactly what's tracked and I can own this, and I maintain the freedom to go out and to in a reasonable way, to go to the gym, to do some exercises, and some other people might have different opportunities. So long story short, I think we have spent too much time talking about how people feel. And with this, I really mean the emotional aspect. I feel like the vaccine is bad. I feel like the government wants to repress us. I feel like those virologists have no idea what they're talking about. And I feel like Bill Gates is, at the end of the day, the person who orchestrated this whole pandemic, and this is not healthy, because everyone should have their opinion and should have their feelings, but we cannot mix this up with science and the scientific knowledge process. And to answer your question, I think yes, we need to be way better. We scientists need to be way better explaining to the general public what we do, and to make sure that people do trust us again. I think at the end of the day, it's a lot about trust.
Yes, people are entitled to their own opinions, but not entitled to their own facts, right? And
nice,
guess
sentence, yes.
Yes. Okay. I see. So we already, like you teasered it a bit, business YouTuber, right? Knowledge YouTubers. So you have been a quite successful YouTuber with your first YouTube. Is it the first one, but the first very successful one, Physics? Now there's Breaking Lab, I guess, right? So having Breaking Lab has 440,000 subscribers. I've just seen that. So please tell me, I'm a PhD student too. please tell me, how did you manage, beside writing papers for your PhD, how did you manage to do so many TV shows and YouTube videos? How did you manage your time? So how did you manage to get something done and still do a great PhD?
Well, with those TV things, I started really early. When I was still at school, I worked at the school radio, and after my high school diploma, I had to do civilian service, and on the side, I was allowed to work at this radio station, and I started to network because I've always been obsessed with media and with the opportunity to research something really, really, really well, and to share this with others, and to share knowledge and to share insights, and also to some extent to entertain people, but to spread knowledge. That has been my key motivation to do this. And I started early on and was lucky enough that I always had the opportunity to do those things on the side during my undergrad, in undergrad times when nobody checks whether you're there, or in physics at least, they don't really care whether you are there or not, as long as you show up for the exams and don't screw it up. They don't care. And so it wasn't
That's different in Germany, right? That's different for American listeners. That's different in Germany, right?
Absolutely. That's one of the many upsides of studying in Germany. But I mean, on the other hand, there are also a bunch of drawbacks that I really miss in German universities, at American universities so extremely well. But so long story short, for me, that has been passion driven, I would say. If I hadn't had this extreme enthusiasm for those projects, then I would not have done it.
I see. I think Philip,
probably that was the reason also why I was able to convince others, like Daniel Kremers, my PhD advisor, that he would allow me to do certain things during my PhD, which also sometimes meant that I had to go away for a few days and not be at the lab for a few days. And he said at the end of the day, like a really good leader at a company, I don't care where you are and how you write your papers. Write your papers. And if you make it happen and you do good science and we're happy with the output, then I don't care whether you do this on the beach in Hawaii. Maybe I'm a bit jealous then, but
All right.
We did go surfing in Hawaii once. Fun fact.
During a Fulbright time, you did surfing?
No, with Daniel. We were at a conference, and the nice thing about Daniel. Computer vision conferences was that they usually picked really nice places. We went to Chile, we went to Hawaii. Another conference was in where was it? In God damn it. Las Vegas was one, right? So they always pick those crazy
the right
places,
spots,
which is extra motivation. I didn't go to the Las Vegas one though, but so and this is a great example for how Daniel works, and I hope that he doesn't mind me sharing this episode. But we went there and we attended all the talks and everything, and after day 3, he said, "We are in Hawaii. We've got to go to the beach, goddammit." He didn't say goddammit, sorry for the language. But, tomorrow morning, the lectures don't seem too interesting. Let's go surfing instead. And we went surfing, right? So know your priorities and enjoy your life. That's one of the things that I definitely learned from him. And that also probably was part of the reason why he would allow me to do certain things.
Okay, so I think there is nothing better to end with than the thought of you guys surfing and maybe hoping for some time when we all can do this again. Okay, let's end this podcast episode with this thought. Thank you so much, Phil, for being here today, and thanks for this wonderful episode.
I thank you. That was great chatting with you.